And students of international politics don't like to theorize in their discipline. But now things have changed. Now you will find all the theories which is being used in other disciplines, in other branches of political science or other social science. The same theories are also being used here in international relations also. So now most of the universities have introduced a paper on international relations theory, an independent paper. That was not the case when I was a student of international politics. So here my modest effort will be to use the relevant theories of international relations, which you all are familiar. And through the theory, I will try to understand this Indian foreign policy, both bilateral, multilateral, and the main concerns, objectives, goals of the Indian foreign policy, how it has been articulated and how it has been executed. And then I will welcome the questions related to that, that how a theory can be used to explain, to understand a particular component, a particular part of Indian foreign policy. So theories, as we all know, are like lenses. So you wear a particular kind of lens and you get a particular kind of picture. You wear the plain glasses, the whole world will look plain. But if you wear the colorful glasses, the whole world will look colorful. Wearing the red glass, the whole world will look red. Wearing the green glass, the whole world will look green. So depending upon the lenses, depending upon the color of the glass you are using to see the world becomes like that. The same applies to the theories also. You use a particular theory and you get a particular kind of picture. Use a different theory, you get a different kind of picture. So depending upon the your theoretical framework, your approach, the treatment of this subject becomes the different. The pictures, the conclusions you reach, that is different. So the words remains the same, the relations remain the same. But if you are using one particular theory, so you reach at the one particular conclusion, you reach another conclusion. So here in international relations, since it is not possible for me to use all IR theories to understand Indian foreign policies, so I will be using only the representative theories of international relations to understand the Indian foreign policy. So we all know in international relations, the most dominant theory is the realism. So I will start from realist theory, that how by using the realist theory, to what extent we can understand, we can explain the Indian foreign policy. But realism, I will be discussing the both realism, the neo-realism as well as classical realism or structural realism. So first I will start from classical realism, the traditional realism of Hans Morgenthau and others, and then I will switch over to structural realism propounded by Kenneth Walsh and Jen Merseymer and others. And then from after realism, I will move to international liberalism. In international liberalism, my focus will be mainly on the theory of complex interdependence developed by Robert Q. Hayne and Joseph Nye, and I will avoid these other strands of international liberalism. So while talking about the international liberalism, my focus will be on this thing. But the institutional liberalism, the democratic liberalism, is also helpful in understanding and explaining the Indian foreign policy. But for paucity of time, lack of time, etc., I mainly will be focusing on complex interdependence. And then the third theory I'll be using, that will be the Marxist theory, because in social science, as we all know, unless and until you are not talking about Marxism, probably social science discussions are not complete. So, as we all know, the Marx has not said much about international politics, though he has discussed the capitalism. He has offered the critique of capitalism in the global terms. And Marx, in his own words, has said that capital doesn't recognize the national frontier, the national borders. The capital is always global, so they overrun all the national frontiers, all the national boundaries. Yeah. But not much Marx has said, which is very useful, relevant for the understanding of international politics, the international relations. The later thinkers who claim themselves to be Marxist, and here particularly I refer to the Latin American dependency thinkers, the dependency school, who had developed the concept of core and periphery. So they are also Marxist. They claim themselves to be Marxist. At the global level, in core periphery terms, they have explained the economic exploitation, the backwardness, the underdevelopment of the third world, etc. So here I will be using the Immanuel Wallerstein's theory of word system theory. So by using word system theory, I'll be talking about Indian foreign policy. So these three theory, and then as we all know, that now we are in international relations, the theory debate. We are in the fourth phase, the fourth debate, and this debate is in that is called post-positivist theory. There, postmodernism, post-positivist theory. There. So among the post-positivist theory, I will focus only on social constructivism. This is the most dominant theory of international relations. So these are the theories which I will be using in my discussion. Realist theory, international liberalism, word system theory, and finally social constructivism. And however, in question answer, we can discuss other theories also. So first, realist theory. So realist theory, as we all know, that realism probably is the most used theory in international relations. And so the realism, as we all know, they're particularly classical realism. Hans Morgenthau has developed this theory of classical realism, and he's also treated as the father of international politics. The Politics Among Nations is the classic works on international politics. So when we have to focus on the geopolitical competition, the geopolitical rivalry, so for understanding of the geopolitical rivalry, geopolitical competition, the conflict, etc., the most appropriate theoretical framework for any research is realist theory. So in realist theory, as Hans Morgenthau has said, that the first principle that international politics is governed by certain objective laws, and these objective laws are rooted in the human nature. So human nature becomes important in the realism, and the realism, the human nature, they have ascribed this. Whatever quality human have, the same quality has been assigned to state also. So human egoism has been assigned to state. Now, in place of human egoism in international politics, we have state egoism. So like human being, the state is also seeking power after power, as Hobbes has said that men seek power after power, and his desire for power ceases only with the death. Same thing can be said about the state also. All states seeks power after power, and this desire for power is natural. The desire for dominance is natural. So this since all states have the same desire, have the same tendency of accumulating power after power, and then using those power, because for realists the power is the means and the power is the end. So all the states want to accumulate more and more power. And since all states are involved in the accumulation of power, so this naturally leads to conflict and competitions here. Because power is such that usually the power is acquired at the cost of others. So a nation is most powerful only when others are weaker. So for geopolitical rivalry, whether it is India-Pakistan geopolitical rivalry, whether it is Sino-Indian geopolitical rivalry, or for that matter, any even Cold War competition between United States of America and Soviet Union. So all kind of conflict, rivalry, competition, the best theoretical approach is the realist. And particularly in this power competition, if you are focusing on the role of leader, the role of actor, the role of decision maker, then the classical realism is the most appropriate. Because if you want to study the role of Indira Gandhi in Indian foreign policy, role of Nehru in Indian foreign policy, role of Gujarat as a foreign policy, if you want to understand the Gujarat doctrine. So for these, the most appropriate method, most appropriate theory approach is the classical realism. Nehru, we all know, is said that he was a very idealist person. His foreign policy conceptualizations and articulation and execution was Nehru's foreign policy. His personality and his thinking is clearly visible, reflected in Nehru's foreign policy. So even it is said when John Foster Dulles, I don't know the authenticity of this statement, but at many places I've read. John Foster Dulles asked Nehru that whether he will be ready to accept this permanent member of the Security Council. But Nehru said no, in place of China, because at that time the nationalist China, that current Taiwan, was the member of this United Nations and was holding the permanent membership of the Security Council. But Taiwan is a small state, a tiny state, who was holding the China seat in United Nations. So John Foster Dulles wanted to give the same seat to India, but Nehru opposed it, refused it. He said that if seat is created and along with China, India is given the permanent membership, it is acceptable to India. But if India is given the Security Council membership at the cost of China, then it is not acceptable. So Nehru, because of his idealism, refused this offer which was given on plate. And just think that if any realist would have been there, probably because of his idealism, etc., he refused. Again, I'm repeating, I'm not vouching the authenticity of this thing, but at some places I have read it. So if probably any Indira Gandhi would have been there, immediately should have accepted. Any realist prime minister would have been there. So the point I'm making here, that if you want to focus on the role of a prime minister, role of a foreign minister, role of any decision maker, so most appropriate methodology will be the classical realism, because his classical realism focuses on the individual, focuses on the actor, focuses on the human nature. So this is about and the same thing about Indira Gandhi. If you want to study this role of Indira Gandhi in Bangladesh crisis, so probably most appropriate methodology will be the classical realism, that how Indira Gandhi, with the active help of General Manek Shah and many other people at that time, so they successfully led India in the Bangladesh crisis. Even there is a possibility that probably China might intervene on behalf of Pakistan. United States of America might intervene on the behalf of Pakistan. And even seventh carrier of United States came to Bay of Bengal also to threaten India, to pressurize India. And because of that, India entered into peace, friendship, cooperation treaty with the Soviet Union also. So role of Indira Gandhi, etc. was dominant. In the same thing can be said about the Gujarat doctrine also. because Gujral was a different kind of person, and he gave one way concession to all its neighbors, so that the no neighbors' interests, the neighbors' demands can be accommodated. So Gujarat shows the large-heartedness. Probably in place of Gujarat, some other foreign minister would have been there. Probably he would not have shown so he would not have given so much concession and unilateral concession, one-way concession to its neighbors. So Gujarat doctrine probably this classical realism is there. So the same way, my point is that if you want to study, if you want to focus on the role of a prime minister, foreign secretary, decision maker, so most appropriate methodology is the classical realism. Same if you want, and then moving to the structural realism. So, structural realism, as we all know, that it is the structure which shapes and determines the foreign policy of a country. And this structure, it can be regional structure, it can be the global structure. So, regional structure, global structure determines, shapes the foreign policy of a state. So, state behavior is shaped by structure, by the system. Here, the classical realism, we say that it is a outside-in approach. Outside-in approach means this foreign policy is the extension of domestic policy. But in structural realism, that is also called outside-in approach. So here it is the external factor, it is the external environment, it is the external system, structure, etc. Rather than foreign policy being extension of the domestic policy. In fact, the domestic policy, the foreign policy itself is the result of the prevailing international system, the prevailing regional system, the prevailing international order, international structure, etc. So here, this is also called outside-in approach. So here, if you want to study the different behavior of India in different period, so the most appropriate methodology will be the structural. Just see the difference of state behavior of India during the Cold War period and the post-Cold War period. During Cold War period, because of the structural reasons, because of the systemic reasons, India has the luxury, India has the choice to side either with Pakistan, either with the United States of America, or with the Soviet Union, or remain neutral. Yeah. Because three possibilities were there. Because it was a bipolar world, so India had a choice to be either with the United States of America or with the Soviet Union. Initially, United States of America had a very friendly policy towards India. Even American president also pressurized British government to expedite the independence of the country. Uh, so, uh, so, but but after independence, but when because it was expectations on part of United States of America that probably democratic India will join the Western Bloc here. Because being a democratic country, the natural choice for India was a Western Bloc that has embraced liberal democracy, the liberal democracy which we have also adopted here. But later on, India started drifting away from United States of America, and gradually United States of America became unfriendly to India. But India had the choice of joining Soviet Union. India had the choice of remaining neutral. Initially, India tried with a neutrality, with a non-alignment. India is the architect of non-alignment. But when the Kashmir issue came and many issues came in United Nations, etc., and India needed a support of one veto holding power, then naturally India started drifting towards Soviet Union. And whenever there was any resolution against India on Kashmir and human rights, etc., on the issue of Goa also. So whenever there was any resolution against India moved by the Western countries, supported by the Western countries, so it was always vetoed by the Soviet Union, and that is why India also supported Soviet Union in this way or that way, either openly supporting Soviet Union or remaining silent. As when Soviet Union intervened in Hungary and when Soviet Union intervened in Czechoslovakia, India maintained a strategic silence and did not say anything. But when France and Great Britain intervened in Suez crisis. So India was a forefront in criticizing these two Western countries, France and Great Britain. And on many issues also, India was critical of, openly critical of the United States of America. So the point I am here making that India initially was non-aligned, but later on during the Soviet crisis, when China was hostile and America was hostile, and Nixon and Kissinger, both who hated Indira Gandhi, hated India, and they were openly supporting Pakistan. So in these situations, India had the options of joining rank with the Soviet Union, and they signed a peace, friendship, and cooperation treaty where Soviet Union committed itself to protect India, to provide security to India, if United States of America or China are intervening on the side of Pakistan, etc. So the point I'm making here, because the global structure was the bipolar structure, it was so in this, by taking the advantage of bipolarity, not only India, even there is example of Egypt. There is example of Egypt. मत करो. There is example of Egypt, uh, who earlier sided with Soviet Union, then sided with United States of America, and kept on changing its side. Uh, but that option was there, only the word was bipolar. When the unipolar word came into existence in 1990, then this every nation was compelled to have a kind of uh, strategic alliance with only one country. Here I'm giving the example of India's and Pakistan's behavior during the Kargil crisis. When the Kargil crisis came, it was unipolar world. So Nawaz Sharif of Pakistan and Atal Bihari Vajpayee of India, both were trying to cultivate good relations with Bill Clinton, who was the American president, and both were requesting Bill Clinton to intervene in this matter, because India was saying that Pakistan has violated the LOC line of control, and their soldiers have infiltrated in our territory, and so these soldiers should go back. And and Pakistan was also pleading to Clinton, saying Clinton that no, our forces has not intervened in India. They have not violated the line of actual line of control, and they said that these people are the indigenous insurgents. So both India and Pakistan came with dramatically opposite positions on Kargil crisis, and both these people, both these leaders, were in touch with Clinton, and they're trying to convince that they are on the right side. And in fact, the Clinton then intervened and then gave clear instructions to Kashmir, to Pakistan, to withdraw its forces from Indian territory, and also gave his instruction to the Vajpayee government to respect the line of control and not to violate it. And that is why during Kargil crisis, when Indians were suffering large casualties, because the Pakistani troops were entrenched on many hills, so they asked for permission by the Vajpayee government to use the Air Force and allow the Air Force to violate the line of control, so that the casualties can be reduced. But since America did not want any kind of escalation of this war, so Vajpayee, keeping the American sensitivity in mind, never allowed the Air Force to violate the line of control, because violation of the line of control probably would have led to escalation of the conflict during Kargil crisis. And America appreciated Vajpayee for this, that the sanctity of LOC remained even during the wartime also. So the point I'm making here, because of being a unipolar world, there was no option for India, there was no option for Pakistan, but to court the same nation, to please the same nation, and to request the same nation to help them to bail out from this crisis. So, and the same thing happened with many countries. So all the countries were forced in the post-bipolar world in the unipolar world to reformulate, to restructure their foreign policy to be on good terms with the single superpower, the sole superpower, United States of America. So this proves this. So this is structural realism. Structuralism argues that the foreign policy of a country is shaped by the structure, the global structure, the regional structure prevailing at one particular point of time. Again, if bipolarity comes, or again if multipolarity comes, so the multipolar world, the bipolar world or unipolar world is reflected in the foreign policy of the all countries. So here, by using this structural realism and also by using the classical realism, so if you are focusing on the role of actors, the role of leaders, then appropriate methodology is the classical realism. But if you are focusing on the role of a structure, the role of system, the global structure, the regional structure, then the appropriate methodology is the Kenneth Walls structural realism. The next theory I will be discussing is the international liberalism. So, international liberalism, the realism focuses on the power, competition, rivalry, etc. And realism relies on Hobbesian descriptions of human nature. But here the liberal theory relies on the Lockean description of the human nature. So if as per Hobbes and the realist anarchy is like a Hobbesian word where this kind of state of war against everyone. Here is the this Lockean conception, the human nature. He has given a very good account of the human nature, and as per Locke, the human prefers to cooperate and has the goodwill towards all the persons. So his relation is characterized by cooperation, not with enmity. So the trust, cooperation, and is the hallmark of peoples to people relations here. So since Locke gives a positive account of the human nature, so if you are using the Lockean view of human nature, you will get a different kind of words picture here. So here the word is cooperative, the word is a place where peace can be established, etc. And in this international liberalism, they say that this trade, commerce, and business brings the nations together. They say that the trading nations don't wage war. So trading nations, because of the large volume of trade, commerce, and business, so their economies are intertwined. Now, in the contemporary world, when all the nations are trading with almost all the nations of the world, so a kind of complex interdependence has emerged there. So, because of many reasons, because of trade, commerce, business, and because of many global challenges also, because the climate challenge is there, and it is a global threat. Since it is a global threat, so solution has to be at the global level. So the whole world has united. All countries of the world has united to deal with the problem of climate change, global warming, etc. And the same thing can be said about the proliferations of the weapons of mass destruction here. Because if these weapons of mass destruction are used, so the whole world will be destroyed. So here again, the international community has come together, cutting across national boundaries, etc. So almost the whole world are united in preventing the proliferations of the weapons of mass destruction. So there are many global challenges, global issues, where the nations are cooperating, and here they trust each other. So this liberal theory talks about the absolute gain. So the absolute gain in the liberal theory that everybody is benefiting here. So if nations are cooperating in the field of trade, commerce, business, in the field of climate, global warming, etc., on every global issue. So if nations are cooperating, all the nations will be beneficial. So they talk about the win-win situations. So all are beneficial if they are cooperating with each other. Realists talk about the relative gain. Relative gain is different from absolute gain. In the relative gain, the gain of one country is a loss for other country. So gain for India is a loss for Pakistan, and gain for Pakistan is a loss for India. So in relative gain, nations will cooperate only when they are benefiting more. But if they are finding that their adversary is gaining more and they are gaining less, so they will not cooperate. So in realist theory, the cooperation is always characterized by relative gain calculation. But in the liberal theory, they talk about the absolute gain. Since everybody is gainer, so that they are not bothered about who is gaining more and who is gaining less. So here, since everybody is a gainer, it's a win-win situation. So they argue that cooperation in all the field, collaboration in all possible field, is beneficial, is mutually beneficial for all the countries. So here I will talk about the India-China relations. So India-China relations, it is all about conflict rivalry. So this conflict rivalry competition is the only one aspect of India-China relations. And if you want to focus on the Sino-Indian rivalry competition, etc., so then the appropriate methodology is the realism. So if you use the realist methodology, you will get the picture that India and China both are eternal enemy, both are rival of each other, both are competitor of each other. They can't be together. Also, this picture you will get if you are using the realist theory. But if you are using the liberal theory for Sino-Indian relation, you get entirely different kind of picture, because India and China both are trading nations, and India's trade with with China is probably more than $100 billion. So more than $100 billion trade. It's a huge trade, and in this, China, in fact, in a profitable position. China is having the surplus trade, and China is the surplus trade of China is around 100 billion. And Indian export to China, that issue I will discuss later in the next theory. But here I am saying that India and China both are cooperating with each other on many issues. So here you can use the institutional liberalism also. So there are many institutions where India and China both are together. You have I'm enumerating those institutions. India and China are together in the basic. Basic was formed in Copenhagen summit when Brazil, India, China, and South Africa came together. So basic, India and China are together. Then India and China are together in the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. So they are also there. Then India and China are together in the trilateral framework, RIC, Russia, India, China. And then, surprisingly, India is also part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, that is called the NATO of the ASEAN, ASEAN NATO. It is a political organization, strategic organization. So India is part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization also. And India is also having multilateral exercises under the banner of Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And India is also here Indian army is also participating in these exercises with the Pakistan army, with the Chinese army, with the Russian army. It's very surprising that Indian army is participating in the military exercises under the Shanghai Cooperation Organization with the Pakistan army. Not only the multilateral, India and China both are conducting the bilateral military exercises also, so popularly called as a hand-in-hand exercise. And this military exercise is aimed at against fighting terrorism. Though scale is very limited, but it in itself is a big thing that Indian military and Chinese military are conducting the bilateral military exercises. So here there are many institutional mechanisms where India and China are cooperating. And you take the example of this Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. India is one of the largest beneficiary of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. It is a Chinese promoted bank, this Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And then another bank, this new democratic bank under this BRICS, that is also Chinese promoted here. So India is part of two Chinese, mainly Chinese promoted banks, the Asian Infrastructure Bank and New Development Bank or Democratic Bank, the exact name I am forgetting. So, and India has taken loan from both these institutions. Despite American pressures, etc., they try to pressurize all their allies not to become the member of Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. But many European countries have also joined Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank despite American opposition. And now the size of the loan given by extended by the Asian Infrastructure Bank is almost equal or slightly higher than the loan given by the World Bank. Since China has the deep pocket, they have money, so they are in advantageous position. So the point I'm making here, there are many issues, whether it is the Doha round of trade talks, the multilateral trade talks, in the Bretton Woods institutions, the World Bank and IMF, they are together. Both India and China are jointly demanding the restructuring of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, because these two institutions are dominated by the West. As we all know, that World Bank president is always American, and IMF president is always European. But now the world reality has changed because these Bretton Woods institutions were created in 1945 at New Hampshire in America. When America, Great Britain, France, and all these countries were the dominant economies. But now the global economy has changed. Now China has emerged as the second largest economy, and also China threatening to overtake America as the leading economy of the world. India is also at the fifth position as far as the GDP is concerned, and in power purchasing parity PPP terms, India is the third largest economy. So in the Indian economy is also in a stronger position. But the strong position of Indian economy and Chinese economy and other South Asian and other Asian economies is not reflected in the decision making process of World Bank and IMF. So here India and China both are demanding together that these two Bretton Woods institutions should be restructured. So on many global issues, India and China they are on the same page. They are together, so they are collaborating. So in the bilateral framework and the multilateral framework, India and China together, trade. I have already said that the trade is an important factor. The high volume of trade is an important factor for keeping Sino-Indian border uh, uh, as a peaceful border, because as we all know that we have concluded many confidence building measures between India and Pakistan, and the aggressive patrolling has been avoided. So the Indian patrol and Chinese patrol, they are patrolling without weapons. And since 1967, we all know that there has been no shooting war between India and China. Even the Galwan conflict was also not a shooting war. Here only the rods were used, the sticks were used, that resulted into the death of 20 Indian soldiers. Many died because they fell into the Galwan River. It was a very cold river, so many died because of cold. Yeah. But no bullets were used, no firing happened. Yeah. So in a very crude way, in very brutal way, by sticks, etc., they attacked each other and they lost their life. But from 1967 was the last shooting war between India and China, when 7 Indian soldiers have died at Nathula in Sikkim. Since then, no shooting war has happened. And from 1967 to 2020, no Indian soldier or Chinese soldier has lost his life. So from 1967 to 20, a very long period of, I think, 50 years, no casualties has happened between India and China, despite all talk about tension between India and China. Uh, so even in the wake of Galwan crisis, also many international analysts have predicted that probably the full-fledged war will break out between India and China. But wise sense prevailed on both sides, India as well as China. The leadership on both sides decided not to escalate the war. Various rounds of talks happened, and it is still happening. And many conflict areas have been resolved, and some are in the process of being resolved. So I think the trade and commerce and the investment and business, which is in between these two countries, probably played an important role in preventing these two countries to go to war. Because if war would have happened, both India would have suffered and China would have suffered. India would have suffered in the sense because we all know the Chinese products are cheaper, and quality is also not that much poor if you go by the cost. So since Chinese products are relatively good and they are very cheap also, so that is why we are going for Chinese product. We are not buying Chinese product because of any love for China. We are buying Chinese product only because Chinese products are cheaper, as well as they are also reliable to a large extent. During Manmohan Singh times, in the name of national security, the corporate houses were asked not to import their telecom equipments and power equipment from China, because they said that the telecom sector and power sector is critical for Indian national security, and we can't compromise our national security with the Chinese equipments, because in any crisis, the telecom and power sector will play an important role. And Chinese, with their Chinese equipments, can destabilize our country by disrupting our telecom services and power supply services. But corporate houses resisted Indian government pressure, and they argued that if you are compelling us to import our power equipment and telecom equipment from European sources, from American sources, then we have to pay more. And if you are paying more for equipments, then we have to raise the cost of call, the cost of power, etc. So if Manmohan Singh government expects the cheaper call rates for consumers and the cheaper power rates for consumers, then government has to allow the corporate houses to import their equipment from any source, including the Chinese source, because that is where the business is run. And eventually, since consumer is king, so Manmohan government cannot afford to annoy the consumer, because the consumer don't want to pay more for power and pay more for their telecom services. So that is why the Manmohan Singh government yielded, and all the corporate houses continued their import of power equipment and telecom equipment from China. So in fact, the machinery, even it makes common sense also, if you are given the choice to buy from your friend and buy from your enemy. And if your enemy is selling cheaper and your friend is selling it at very higher cost, so definitely you will not buy from your friend and you will buy from your enemy, because that is cheaper. So it makes business sense. So same thing is happening in India-China trade also. Indians don't like Chinese, India don't like China. We hate them. But since their products are cheaper and to some extent reliable, that is, we are buying them. Uh, so the point I'm making here, that liberal argument that trade, commerce, business, investment, etc., they make the countries together, and a kind of complex interdependence is generated. So in this complex interdependence, because the liberalism subscribed to the cobweb model of international politics, in this cobweb model of international politics, when all the nations are interdependent upon each other, and now we are in the age of globalization, and the globalization is based on theory of comparative advantage. So where and the comparative advantage theory talks about that the countries should not manufacture those products which is costly and also quality is also poor. So countries should focus only on those products which is of better quality and the cost is also low. And we should, instead of self-reliance, we should import the goods from other countries. So now the globalization, now the contemporary word is said to be the globalized word, the interdependent word. No country can claim to be self-reliant, etc. So here, so liberalism says that in this kind of environment, uh, uh, when the nations are trading and having the business, commerce, investment, etc. So this prepares the ground for peace, for cooperation, and for goodwill among the nations. Yeah. And more and more interactions we will have, whether it is a business interaction, trading interaction. So more interactions will lead to more cooperation, and that will be the conducive to peace. So if you want to focus on this, want to prove that India and China are partner, India and China are not enemy, but they are also partner. They are also cooperating with you. So then the theoretical tool, the theoretical framework, which is available, which is most appropriate, is liberalism, and that to the complex interdependence. You can use complex interdependence also, and you can use institutional liberalism also, because as I said, many institutions are there, which is moderating the crisis, the conflict between India and China, and bringing these two nations together. Now, moving to the third theory, that is the world system theory. So it is a continuation of the same. Because world system theory, the Immanuel Wallerstein's theory, so he talks about the core, periphery, and in between core and periphery, he has got semi-core or semi-periphery. So in this core periphery, as we know, the core is the supplier of finished products, and periphery is the supplier of raw material. So if you look at the India-China trade, you will come to this conclusion. You will find that India has emerged as a supplier of raw material only, and China has emerged as a supplier of finished products. So you see this more than 60%, around 70% of the Indian export to China is only one item, that is iron ore. So more than 60%, around 70% of Indian export to China is only one item, that's an iron ore. And in remaining 30%, that is again there is no finished product. In the remaining 30% also there is a primary commodity, the raw material, the natural resources. So India is on the one hand supplying this raw material and the primary commodities, and on the other hand importing the finished products. India has advantage in the pharmaceutical sector. India has advantage in the IT sector. India has advantage in the IT enabled services. But here China, on this ground or that ground, has never allowed the level playing field for the Indian software companies. Yeah. So here China has been practicing the protectionism. As we all know, when the RCEP was being negotiated, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Cooperation. So in the RCEP, China was mainly interested in the free exports of the goods. But when the issue of services came, so China was not so much interested in services. Because in service sector, India probably had was in advantageous position. And as far as goods export import is concerned, so India would have lost, because the cheap in Chinese products would have been dumped in our Indian market. Our indigenous industries would have been decimated, and in service sector they were not so open. So India have advantage in service sector, and in service sector they are not opening, and India is not on an advantageous position in the goods sector, and there China insisting. So that is why we eventually took the decision not to join the RCEP, and we came up. So as I say, even in the pharmaceutical sector, in the IT sector, where India can be in better position to China on this ground or that ground, has always been adopting the protectionist measures, and have not been allowing the level playing field to the Indian companies. Whereas the Chinese products, you all know, they have dumped everything in India, from solar panels to telecom equipment, power equipment, machinery, electronics. India is one of the major market for the Chinese products here. We all hear about China making profit by selling the pichkaris, the holy equipments, and the Diwalis, the jhalars and diyas, etc. China is making profit from there also, but that is only a small portion of their trade. Uh, the jhalar, diya, Ganesh ji are also benefiting Chinese economy, but the major source of Chinese profit is the machinery, equipment, electronic good, etc., and that in bulk that is being coming to India. So that is a grave concern. Government of India is concerned about that. Many steps have been taken, many policies have been adopted, but somehow the Chinese export to India is not coming down. During during Galwan crisis and this pandemic, this some trade came down, but again in the post-pandemic, post-Galwan period, again the Chinese export to India is rising, and it is again out of control. And Chinese deficit is huge deficit here. China, as I said, is having around $100 billion trade surplus with India. We all know that the China-Pakistan economic corridor cost is around 50 billion here, and India and China is making $100 billion every year in trade with India. So you can imagine this that how much China is profiting from its India trade here. China, with only profit of only 1 year, China can finance two CPEC because $100 billion, $50 CPEC total cost. So means China can finance two CPEC every year by the profit of only 1 year. So here, by this imbalanced trade, this one-way trade, this trade hugely in favor of China and hugely against India, and China deliberately trying to restrict India to supplier of raw material. This proves the thesis of Immanuel Blusten's system of world system theory. So, if you want to study the imbalanced trade between India and China, and so here this Immanuel Blusten's core periphery theory is most appropriate. China wants to retain its status of a core country, and China want to maintain India's status as a periphery country. So this core periphery relations can continue in India, and in the core periphery relation, it is the core which always exploit the periphery. So in this kind of trade, in China is exploiting India, and India is being exploited by China in this core periphery relationship. So here, for imbalanced trade, for huge deficit, etc., the most appropriate methodology is what system theory of Immanuel Blusten. Now coming to the last theory, this social constructivism. Social constructivism, we all know this theory is in all the disciplines of social science. This is a theory of postmodernism, post-positivism. So far, all the theories which we have discussed, they belong to the positivist group. But this social constructivism theory, critical theory, and others, they belong to the post-structuralism, post-positivism. So here, all the theories, realism, liberalism, and word system theory, they spoke about the objective reality. But here, the post-positivism, the postmodernism, they don't accept anything as objective. They say everything is subjective. So they don't accept that anything is absolute truth or anything is final. So there is nothing like final truth. There is nothing like absolute truth. The so-called absolute truth and final truth, in fact, is the subjective perception of a particular time period. I mean, and a subjective perception of a group of thinkers, persons, whose interest is involved here. So everything is constructed, everything is subjective, nothing is absolute, nothing is final. So social constructivism says that so the person who has developed the social constructivism in IR theory, he is American international relation thinker, Alexander Wendt. So Alexander Wendt has written a paper that was later developed in a book, that anarchy is what state make of you. So anarchy, Kenneth Wall, Jan Mercimer, are all realist thinkers who talk about the anarchy, and the liberals also talk about the anarchy. The only difference between anarchy of realist and anarchy of liberal is that for realist, anarchy is unregulated, can't be mitigated here. But for liberals, they say that by institutional, by the global institutions, by constructing global regime, by constructing global institutions and treaties, etc., this international anarchy can be regulated, can be mitigated, can be mitigated. But both accept it as an objective reality. The social constructivists, they say this anarchy is not objective. In fact, it is a subjective. Since and this is also not a objective, is not fixed, not given, not permanent. This so-called anarchy is the dynamic, changing, and the anarchy depends upon the perception of the people who are involved in perceiving anarchy and as per their understanding of anarchy in formulating and articulating the behavior of the state, the foreign policy of the state, policies of the state. So anarchy is not a fixed and given thing. Anarchy itself is a subjective thing, and since it is a subjective, this anarchy can be made, can be unmade, can be changed, etc. So anarchy is also a construction, and in this construction of anarchy, the perception of the individual, the perception of the decision maker, perception of foreign minister, foreign secretary, prime minister, president, etc., whoever leads the country, whoever takes the decision of the state, their perception matters a lot. So, because of different perception of the global structure, different perception of the regional structure, the response is also different. So, here I will give you one example of Manmohan Singh government and Modi government to explain this point. Uh, the regional structure and global structure during Manmohan Singh times and during Modi's time is similar. There is hardly any difference between the global structure, regional structure of Manmohan Singh period and the global and regional structure of Modi's period. But the response of Manmohan Singh government and the response of Modi government has been different. So if you go by the structural realism of Kenneth Wall, Jan Mersem, etc., so there can't be any difference between Modi's response and Manmohan Singh's response, because they say that it is the structural regions, structural constant, they shape the behavior of the state. So if you take the help of structural realist and others, then you can't explain the difference between Modi's response and Manmohan Singh's response. So if you have to study the Modi's response and Manmohan Singh's response and different response, then the only alternative theory available to you is the social constructivism. I'm giving you one example to illustrate this point further. Modi government conducted surgical strike after the Uri attack and after the Balakot attack. And both these surgical strikes were firstly disputed by the Congress party, and then the Congress party came with this theory that they have also conducted surgical strike. Even some military commanders of that time also came forward and gave media interview. Yes, this surgical strike was conducted in Manmohan Singh period also. Now the point arises, okay, I'm not getting into this whether Manmohan Singh government conducted surgical strike or not, and whether Modi's, as the critics of Modi said that surgical strike is a propaganda, etc. So I'm not getting into it. But the thing is that because critics of Modi also said that in surgical strike, some trees were destroyed, nothing happened, and no one was killed, and etc. Many things that is well known to all of us. But the point here is that when Manmohan Singh conducted the surgical strike, what was the reasons that Manmohan did not reveal it to the world? Why Manmohan hid it to the world? Why Manmohan did not tell it to anyone? Why Manmohan did not inform its own countrymen that we have conducted this strike? Did not inform the international community. Nobody knew except the few military commanders and probably Prime Minister and Defense Minister. Nobody knew that this was conducted. So why Manmohan Singh did this? Because Manmohan was afraid of escalation. Manmohan was afraid. Manmohan would have been thinking on this line that India is a nuclear weapon country, Pakistan is a nuclear weapon country, both are nuclear weapon country, and if they are escalating the conflict, so probably it might lead to the mutually assured destruction of each other, the MAD doctrine, which is the popular doctrine of nuclear war. So they had been entering into a mutually annihilating war, and it had been destructive for both the countries. So despite conducting surgical strike, they did not publicize it. They kept it a closely guarded secret, which came out when Modi government conducted surgical. Otherwise, the world would not have known. The Indian people would not have known that Manmohan government has also conducted surgical strike. Because Manmohan was afraid of escalation of the conflict, probably leading to the nuclear war. Or could not face the international pressure here. He yielded to international pressure because definitely, if you are escalating the war, there will be pressure from the international community to de-escalate, to bring down the conflict, etc. So those considerations would have been there. Manmohan could not. Manmohan succumbed to international pressure. Manmohan succumbed to the nuclear war logic, etc. When it came to the the Modi government, Modi probably would have thought, and come what may, we will punish Pakistan. Not only we punish Pakistan, we will publicize to the whole world. The whole world must know how Pakistan has been punished. So Manmohan Singh government not only conducted surgical strike, but Modi government conducted surgical strike and shouted from the rooftop that we have done it here. And threatened further that in future, if Pakistan is indulging again in this kind of cross-border terrorism, India will punish Pakistan again. Yeah. So it was a strong message from India, from Modi, from the Indian forces that any strike from Pakistan will not go unpunished here. So the Pakistani strategy of 1,000 cuts and bleeding India, etc. So that the strategy will not succeed. If you are hurting us, so India will not hesitate in hurting you. So Pakistan will be paid in the same point. So this was the reason. So if you go by the structural arguments, so probably you will not be able to explain the different kind of response, the different kind of behavior of Modi government and Manmohan Singh government. But if you use this social constructivism of Alexander Went, so then easily you can explain the different behavior of Manmohan government and Modi government. Since the Manmohan's perception of regional and global structure was different, and Modi's perception of regional and global structure were different, so it was reflected in different response. So with this, probably I have taken 1 hour and probably more than that. So as I said earlier, we will have half an hour for a discussion, and we can prolong discussion also if you are interested here.